Hello, everyone. I want to show you a game from the archives. Game number 4 from the 1986 World Championship match between Gary Kasparov and Anatoly Karpov. That would be the third match. They had the first one in 1984, which was stopped um, due to health concerns for Anatoly Karpov late in the match, with him holding a 5-3 lead. The rematch was played in 1985, which Kasparov then won the title at 22 years old. And now, as world champion, Kasparov is defending his title for the first time against Anatoly Karpov in their third match. And this is 1986. And this match took place between London and Leningrad. And this game is going to be based on loosely on the notes of Kasparov himself in the book Kasparov London Leningrad Championship Games. All right, so let's get to it. Again, it's game 4. Uh, the first 3 games had ended in draws, and Kasparov has the white pieces, and Anatoly Karpov has the black pieces. D4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, Nimzo Indian, bishop b4, and knight f3. Okay, so here it is, a Nimzo Indian. This setup really changed Kasparov's fortune, um, because before he was playing into the Queen's Indian with knight f3, and Karpov was getting good games with b6. When he decided to switch over to the Nimzo Indian, um, he really started to give Anatoly Karpov troubles. So the game continued. c5, g3, c takes d4. And at the time, this was the main line of this variation. So he walks right into it. Knight takes d4, castles, bishop g2, d5, and queen b3. Okay. Now, um, during this time in 1986, this was basically the main line. Um, Other moves that had been tried before this was c takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop d2, knight takes, b takes, and then bishop e7 or bishop c5. And black basically equalized with comparative ease. So this is why this attempt kind of vanished of c takes d5 for white. He was looking for something new. So again, back to the game. Queen b3, attacking this bishop. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and now just know that, because I know some of you structural lights out there want to keep the pawn structure clean, but queen takes c3 does not really work here because of e5 and following up with d4, and black, is able to seize the initiative. So b takes c3 was played. And Karpov played knight c6, which was a surprise at the time. And I'll just share with you what Kasparov had to say right here about this move. He said Karpov made this move instantly, seemingly with the aim of stunning me. it was evident that the creative process of searching for the strongest continuation for black had proceeded in parallel. And basically, what he was saying was that his team had also been working on this line, and they had spotted this move. So continuing on, C takes D5 was played, and also after a move like knight takes C6, B takes C6, um, white falls behind in development and strengthens black center. Okay. Now, C takes D5. And if knight A5, then white drops back with queen C2. And knight takes D5. And that, um, it seems okay for black also, as white has this weak target right here on C3. And also black has good um, development. So let's go back. So queen C2, I'm sorry, C takes D5, and knight A5 was played here. And Kasparov basically says that's better than just taking back E takes D5 and the castle, for example, rook E8, bishop G5, knight takes, C takes, rook takes E2, and then he gets rook F E1 with strong pressure from white, because you can see the pin of the knight, and then there's a lot of pressure on D5, and this rook is about to get exchanged. So this move was very important. Instead of just capturing back, this in between move, fighting for the initiative, queen C2, now capturing with the knight, and we can see the weakness of the C pawn. And now here Kasparov played the move queen D3. He rejected castling on account of bishop D7, bishop A3, rook E8, C4, rook C8, C5, and B6 with a good game for black. So he plays queen D3, getting the queen off the C file. Karpov plays bishop D7. And now C4. So you can see the difference now with the queen off of the C file. There's no pin that white has to worry about. Knight E7. Castles. Now Karpov plays rook C8, just putting the pressure on this pawn. And now Kasparov suggests for Karpov to play bishop C6 and being willing to part with his second bishop. And gives the line knight takes C6, knight E takes C6. Alright. And he says this is black's best chance. However, he says instead of taking, He says the correct reply is to play bishop to a3. And then after bishop takes g2, king takes g2, that white can retain the initiative. But then he goes on to admit that black's position does not contain any weakness, as you can see, and is perfectly defendable. So white has a little push here, even though I can't really see any. But he does have a little bit more space, and white has a little bit better development here. But again, this pawn structure is pristine for black, and he can easily hold this, I'm sure. Okay, where were we? So 13c4. After 13c4, okay, let's go back to 12. Right, bishop d7. Now c4 hitting the knight. Knight drops back. Castle. Rook c8. And now knight b3. Now this move forces black to exchange, allow his b7 pawn to be exchanged right here for this pawn. So knight takes, and now bishop takes b7. This is actually works out good for white, because white gets rid of that weakness there. So now rook c7 from Karpov. Bishop a6 by Kasparov. Alright. So now basically the bishop's job on this diagonal is finished. And now it basically gets a new job on the a6 to f1 diagonal. Alright. So, and it puts a lot of pressure on this knight because c4 is a good outpost for black. And so the bishop basically turns its attention on that. So now knight e5 from Karpov. If knight g6, with the idea of coming here, then just simply f4. Because the idea behind knight g6 is if bishop takes, then knight e5, getting the piece back. So instead of capturing right here right away, you would simply play f4, guarding this square. So instead, knight e5 was played straight away. And now queen e3. Now Kasparov was worried about queen d6 and bishop c8. Okay, but it seems in his analysis that he missed this move. Queen takes e5. So he played queen e3, just challenging the knight right away. So let's look at this again. Queen d6, which he rejected on account of bishop c8. So now you see the queen, is on prise, bishop is on prise. But after just queen takes e5, bishop takes a6, bishop b2 with this battery against g7. How to defend. Knight f5, e4 exclamation. The knight is forced to stay there. So bishop takes, e takes, This is on pre's again. F6. Queen takes E6. Check. King to the corner. Rook takes F1. And let's say after Rook E8, Queen A6. Two minor pieces versus the Rook. And White is definitely better here. So let's go back. And we conclude that he should have played this move, Queen D6. Okay. Instead, he played the move Queen E3, which attacks the knight without allowing the move that he feared, Bishop C8. You know, with the attack on the queen. Karpov played Knight C4. Another option was F6. And Bishop A3, right, with this little X-ray on the Rook here. Rook F7. And Rook AC1, and Black has to keep an eye open on the activity of White's pieces. Start getting very active. Karpov, Knight C4. And now Queen E4. Okay. Now, again, you have to watch out for being too greedy here. Say, for instance, White tries to go for the A pawn with Bishop takes C4. Rook takes C4. And Queen takes A7. It's going to be met by Knight D5. And then Black starts getting active. For example, Bishop B2. You got Rook A4. Queen C5. Queen B8. Queen C2. And then Rook C8. And then you had like this Benoni type pressure down on the queen side. You know, even though White's up a pawn, it's very difficult to extract you know, the advantage out of this with all this piece activity. So this is why Kasparov rejects the opportunity to grab the A7 pawn. Usually in such situations, it's like, you know, and of course there's exceptions to a lot of chess rule, but always remember this saying that's attributed to Capablanca, who said first material, excuse me, he said first position, then material. And that covers a lot of these situations when you have a chance to gain material. Always think of the position first. You know, a lot of beginning chess players like will rush and try to snatch the pawn, and then the you know, the tides will turn. You know, the opponent will get real active, or you know, they wind up losing material themselves in the end. So you always take care of your position first. You make sure your position is strong. If your position is strong, the material will come. Especially if a pawn is weak, the pawn usually will stay weak. You know, if you take care of your position, then you'll be able to get it. You know, when the time is right. All right, let's keep going. Knight C4 was played here. This attack, and Kasparov played Queen E4. And now here, Knight D6. Again, another attack by Karpov on the queen. And Kasparov criticizes that move Knight D6 and says that Queen A8 was better. The direct challenge. And now he says this ending after Queen takes, Rook takes, Bishop G5, Knight D5. And it gets Rook FC1, Knight C, B6, Bishop D2. And so White has a good, still has a strong advantage here. Black is like barely trying to hold on in this position. Going back once again. So Karpov played knight d6. And it's interesting reading Kasparov's notes, especially at this time, because we gotta understand too, like the underlying stories behind these things is that he's a lot of time, I think, overly critical of Karpov. Being that they had this great rivalry and stuff, so he's not always being completely objective here. Also, sometimes I think he's like overly harsh on Karpov's moves. But anyway, knight d6 was played, and now queen d3. Strong move. Okay. So now the queen is back where it was before, right? It's some kind of triangulation, but the knight is not able to move to a good, anywhere at this point. So a piece has to be moved, and now rook c8. Excuse me, rook c8. Sorry about that. Rook c6 was played. Bishop a3. Whoops. Attacking. Now bishop c8. Bishop takes c8 and knight d c8. This one. So Karpov's trying to get some trades. All right. Now here's an important note by Kasparov. He says here, black's basic defect in this position is the insecure, poorly coordinated placing of his pieces. Okay, that's what he says is black's major problem. And if you look at the position, it is, right? I mean, the pawn structure for black is perfect, pristine, but his pieces are awkwardly placed. The knights are like on the back two ranks, right? And the rook is on c6, so, and the other rook is jammed up behind this knight. His pieces are a little, little bizarro looking. So if black can straighten this out, then he will be on his way to holding this position. So this is kind of Kasparov's job, is to keep black uncoordinated, right, by threatening and keeping the pressure constantly on. Let's see what happened now. Kasparov plays rook fd1. Right, so he allows the endgame. Queen takes, rook takes, and now rook e8. So Karpov gets out of this pin. Kasparov says after rook a6, then just simply knight c5. Then after rook c6, he gives rook b1 and rook e8, and then rook b7, and he gives white the nod there. Says white has good winning chances there. So after rook takes d3, rook e8 was played. Rook a d1, and conquest of the d file has been accomplished. f6 is played by Karpov as a potential escape square for the king. Knight d4, attacking the rook and the e6 pawn. So now Karpov has to be careful. He plays rook b6. Of course, on rook a6, then knight b5. Bishop c5. Notice how Kasparov is just keeping the initiative. Rook a6. And now knight b5, threatening this nice little fork here. And now rook c6. I know you're thinking about it. what happens if rook takes a2? Knight c7. Again, attacking two objects. Rook f8. Knight takes, rook e8. Knight c7. Rook f8. And then just simply rook e3, exploiting this pin on this piece here. Again, position first, then material. That's why you can't grab that pawn. So knight b5, rook c6. And now, strong move by Kasparov. Bishop takes e7. And knight takes e7. Why not rook takes e7? Can you see? Why not rook takes e7? Problem with rook takes is rook d8 check. King f7. And then rook takes c8. After rook takes c8, bang, the fork. Isn't it funny how all combinations always break down to simple, real simple combinations at the end, right? Like if I showed you this position and said white to move and win, you would find this fork, in 1 second, right? But if I showed you the position from here, it might take you a little longer because there's layers. It's a little more complex. It might take you a little, a minute or something maybe to find this move. Some people will find it right away. It depends on how strong tactically you are. But these combinations all break down to real simple things. Even from here, can you see that there will be a fork at the end? So this is why rook takes e7 was not possible, and instead knight takes e7. And of course, Karpov didn't want to allow it, but he had no choice. And now the invasion of the second rank, or seventh rank. This creates the additional threat of knight coming in to d6. Okay. And notice how Kasparov, again, he didn't rush to grab pawns, right? Material first. Position first. First, he takes over, dominates the position. Okay? See, because you got to look at it like this. Say, like let's use a war analogy again in chess. If you're going to war against another country, right? And you conquer that country, then everything in that country is yours. All right, you take over everything. If you conquer the country, then everything is yours. You don't have to steal something here and there because you own everything. So just look at it like that. Don't try to steal pawns or things that are insignificant to the big picture in the position, but rather try to take over as much as possible. Try to take the whole country. Because when you get that, then all the things in the country are going to be yours. All right. So here, Kasparov doesn't have to, steal a pawn or something like that. In other words, he takes over the position so that everything will fall naturally into his lap. Knight g6. And now he cashes and rook takes. And now knight f8. Of course, being concerned here about this. And a4. Rook b8. And this prevents a4, a5 temporarily. e3. h5. King g2. e5. Rook d3. And the purpose behind rook d3 is that white now wants to simplify the position by exchanging a pair of rooks instead of keeping two rooks on. Just one pair of rooks. King h7, rook c3, rook b c8, takes. Now knight c7. And now, of course, Karpov has to worry about the knight coming here with this double attack here. Knight e6. And of course, knight takes e6 was perfectly playable. Knight takes, rook takes, and then say a5 going to a pure rook ending. But Kasparov decides to keep the knights on the board and plays knight d5, which is perfectly playable. And now there's the threat of knight takes f6. Okay, so king h6, and now he decides to push a5, e4, a6, and this is where Karpov resigned. So this was the first decisive game in the 1986 match, and real strong, straightforward game, the Nimzo Indian by Gary Kasparov. Um, Kasparov goes on to note that this was no premature resignation, and he gives example. For example, knight c5. Right, if you try to double attack this pawn, then this is winning. And he says rook d6. Says rook d6. Then just simply he gives knight e7 here, threatening this fork of the rook and king. And rook d1. He just gives rook a8, king h7, a7, rook a1, knight c6, protecting the pawn so that the rook can move, and knight g5, and then rook e8, and white wins in that line also. And in closing, where do we end here? The a4, e4, a6, and again that was the end. And in closing, let me just share Kasparov's final words on this game. So he writes, some commentators wrote that Kasparov had won an excellent game against Karpov in, quote, Karpovian style. Of course, Karpov's style and mine are very different. I've always preferred a complicated, dynamic struggle. I cannot help being flattered by comparisons with the ex-world champion in technique. But for such a comparison, my playing game 2 would have been more appropriate. Here in the fourth game, the world champion made clear and strong moves in accordance, and he's talking about himself. Remember that Kasparov is the world champion now. Made clear and strong moves in accordance with the demands of the position. And in this, of course, Karpov does not have a monopoly. I regard this fourth game, conducted consistently and energetically by White from beginning to end, as one of the best I have played in my long-running duel with Karpov.